Well, just like that, the NFL draft is over. The Philadelphia Eagles have completed their crop of players for another year. After what has been a very long-winded weekend, there's been a lot of trades. Last night was particularly bad. For anyone that was in the stream last night, I was a shadow of my former self. I was fighting the sleep demons as best I could. Today, there was a little bit more energy. The team seemed to have a bit more confidence, I think, in those selections. I honestly figured that coming into day three, given how conservative they were in day two, that they would be moving a lot more assets, that they'd be happy to trade a few more picks. And it did start that way. And then towards the end, they went back to that tried and tested formula of investing in the trenches, getting players that are dominant on both sides of the ball. And then, of course, a project quarterback as well, just for good measure, because what would an Eagles draft be without a new member to the quarterback factory? So there's a lot to get through. We'll go over all of the picks that have been made, just a little outline on each player. And then, of course, going into next week, I will have my streams at least, so Monday, Wednesday, Friday, with a film room going through each night on each separate player. So we're going to start Monday with Jahad Campbell. So if you want to see that, there'll be a live film breakdown Monday evening at around 6 p.m. So I'd love to see you guys for that. And we'll dive into it. But for now, we've got plenty of draft picks to get through. So we'll start in round number 4, which is where all of the good stuff started happening. And they got themselves a monstrous defensive tackle by the name of Ty Robinson out of Nebraska. So the big thing here with him is that he's just got a monumental RAS score. Like, the team have a real knack now for trying to really lock in and find these hidden gems with outlandish athletic traits. And we've featured it over the years. I know Ant DeBonner, one of our writers, is really prominently featured it this year. But Kent Lee Platt's relative athletic score system at MathBomb on Twitter is a really good way just to see how athletic these players are in relation to others at their current position. And obviously, you can make the assumption that every team will go after players that test athletically well. But when you weigh that up against, production and character and where does height and weight come into it? Maybe they've got a great 40, but the others aren't so good. The Eagles tend to really, really cherish these athletic traits, like things like the 10 and 20-yard short shuttles, the 40-yard dash, depending on position. But the vertical and broad, especially for defensive linemen, is absolutely huge. And Ty Robinson ticks nearly every single box, getting an elite grade in all of the metrics, apart from his size. He's a little bit lighter. He's only 288 pounds, which for a defensive tackle is pretty light. Like, if you're going up against 300-pound offensive linemen, you would like a little bit meat on the bone. Not to say you can't bulk up, but also, if we're being honest, look at who he could be replacing in the rotation. It's going to be Milton Williams, who too was another light defensive tackle. He was freakishly athletic and was able to just cause absolute havoc in the trenches. So just off the bat, I think that's a really smart pick. It's not a sexy pick, but it is one that I think will get the job done pretty well. We'll get to some of your comments as they come through. So if you've got any questions or comments about the players that have been drafted today, feel free to drop them in. We'll go to LittleG first, who gives them a grade of A+++. So he is buzzing like an excited bumblebee there with the draft. Good to see you, my friend. Greg, nice to see you in, my friend, as well. Says it's the second draft. How he leaves us hanging at the end of the third round, only to trade out. Yeah, I still had PTSD after last year. I figured it was going to be much longer than that. I figured they could have traded back again. But it felt like both trades they made, that they were potentially like holding out for a player that just didn't quite become available. I know Charles Grant, the offensive lineman, the small school sleeper, was one of the players that was rumored to be very high in the Eagles' priority list. And it's kind of the price you pay for being so good. If you're going to win a Super Bowl, you're going to pick at the back of these NFL drafts, then you're going to miss out on some players. They are going to get picked to the post, and you kind of have to just accept that. So if they're not there, I think the best thing that they've done is just learning not to swing. I think the most interesting development was around this 4th, 5th round range. There was, of course, talk of them willing to take a chance on Shedeur Sanders, which I don't know. I don't think Philadelphia would have been the best spot for him. But I understand how he's, value mindset and taking a punt on a player that should have been a first-round pick in terms of ability. But the character concerns, the attitude, the Dion interventions, like, is it worth the noise? I don't think for a locker room that is so tightly knit, that has been so built fundamentally on character and courage and like all of these fundamental things for leadership, that someone like Sanders is going to just walk in and like I couldn't see that working out. Like, really, if there was any team to get him, it was going to be the Cleveland Browns, right? Like, it just made so much sense because they're just abysmal in every way when it comes to drafting quarterbacks. So, yeah, that was intriguing, but at the same time, didn't take a swing on it, didn't trade up, just let the Browns do it. Obviously, Howie's got a relationship with Andrew Berry, the GM of the Browns, former side man, if you will, of Howie Roseman, right-hand man. So that was kind of cool to see. Dan says, happy Saturday. And Mr. Marshall Lynch says, who did we draft? Well, we started it off with none other than Ty Robinson, and we're going to get to a couple of the other ones as the draft goes on. The second trade they made was actually in that 4th round. They got back on the phone, ended up sending the Jets, pick number 140, and got 145 and 207. So they ended up going into the 5th round with 4 draft picks. Now, look, as someone that runs a sports news website, I will say one thing and one thing only. That 5th round was ridiculously difficult to try and cover because we're constantly trying to work out whether we do individual player pieces, whether we go round by round, then it's who does what. By the time someone's written something, there's another player been selected. It got messy. That was the most frantic round of the weekend for us, but it was a lot of fun. And worthwhile, I will say that. I think it was very worthwhile. The first thing they did was go out and sign cornerback or draft cornerback Mac McWilliams out of Central Florida. So another kind of smaller school player, but someone that RAS-wise tests very well, PFF-wise looks very good. Someone that I think there's been a lot of love from a few analysts around the Eagles Twitter over the last few weeks. So that's been kind of cool to see. And I'm all for it. I think realistically, you don't have to go out and sign a starting cornerback right away. I think the round they've drafted him in the 5th, to me, says there's still some confidence around Keely Ringo. There's some confidence around Adoree Jackson. And you don't need to force that move. Like, you could have gone on for a Will Johnson. You could have gone on for a Noel Williams or whoever in the 2nd round. But at the same time, do you need to spend another asset in the secondary when you can easily go and get a player from another area? And given they drafted the safety last night, I don't think there's a need to do that. I mean, to me, also, I know there's been some talk after this of a Cooper DeJean move. I feel like every stream we've had this weekend, we've spoken about a potential Cooper DeJean move. Not off the team, we're not going crazy, but just in terms of like maybe to safety, maybe to the boundary. And I think after this, it's maybe a little bit more plausible. Just given what Howie said during his press conference about trying to move him around and just see where he's most comfortable and not making it too, complex. At the end of the day, he's a cornerback that's 5'10", 191 pounds. You're not going to stick him outside against some of these 6'3", 6'4" wide receivers. That's a slot cornerback by just pure physical definition. So as good as this, I've said it all weekend. I feel like Cooper DeJean is going to move. And look, if I'm honest, like if there's a spot to bring in a corner where, let's say Adoree Jackson doesn't pan out, you don't want him outside. I think every Eagles fan can safely say they would trust Cooper DeJean outside like their life depended on it. He played there during college. He's played there occasionally. I wouldn't mind it. I think, look, I would prefer to see him at safety if he was going to move. But given the draft decisions they've made, I'm totally not against him going outside. And if there, as I said, if there's ever a spot to put in someone less experienced or a rookie corner, you want him in the nickel where you've got some help from linebackers, you've got some help from safeties, you've got shadowing corners on the boundary. I think that just works a little bit better. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if McWilliams ends up being, I'm not saying he's going to start out of the gate, maybe he's got to compete for it. It's going to be really intriguing to see how they line these corners up. Do they go with DeJean on the outside? Do they put him in the slot? Do they just have McWilliams as a backup to DeJean and have Jackson and Ringo on the outside? There's a lot of versatile options that they can use. And I'm impressed. I mean, McWilliams graded out as UCF's best defender last year with an 81.6 grading from PFF. Looked good at Mobile, however you boys pronounce it, in Alabama for the Senior Bowl. So, yeah, we'll get to his film a little bit later, and I think maybe that will tell us a bit more about his future with the Eagles and where he's going to line up. But I think at the very least it has brought them some level of flexibility, because now if they want to move someone around, they've got that ability to do so. Greg says, drafting McCooper and McWilliams tells me Cooper will be playing the Malcolm Jenkins role. I really like that. That would probably make the most sense instead of giving him like a hard move outside or a hard move over the top. Like he kind of feels built for that box safety role, or almost, you know, I hate to say it, a honey badger type role where it is just flying around the field, like although primarily lined up in a box safety role. I think LSU did a really good job of just having these like hybrid safeties start roaming the defensive backfield and just making plays everywhere. And I think that's the sort of area I could see DeJean shining in. And given that defenses continue to get lighter, it's intriguing. I'm excited. I think, look, I'm a big sucker for secondary players. I love corners. I love watching them compete in training camp and preseason. Nothing quite gets the NFL mind in me going quite like a week 3 NFL preseason game where you've just got like the 3rd and 4th string guys competing. Like, I absolutely love it. So I think we're going to see some interesting things come this summer. Nice to see you, K1. I hope you're excited about the results of the NFL draft. Greg says Makuba doesn't look like he's taking starter snaps and Nika will be a rotation in the preseason. Yeah, we shall see. It's going to be, it's very fun. Look, they've got a really good problem now where they have options. They're not coming out of this draft where they don't know what they're doing. I think they can experiment. They can see which combinations work against set offensive looks and that sort of thing. And they've got the personnel to do it. You've got a complete nickel corner now that did very well at UCF. You've got yourself Cooper DeJean, who was an incredibly talented rookie corner in his first year. And then you've got, you know, a new safety in Makuba as well. So we shall see. But I'm a fan of that move as well. If we go a little bit further down, the next move was another Georgia Bulldog. So much like the quarterback carousel and the conveyor belt that we continuously see in Philadelphia, it just wouldn't quite be an NFL draft without another Georgia Bulldog. So another one added into the dog pound. This time it's Smail Mondon Jr, a linebacker, pronounced like Smile, I've just seen in Corey's articles, like completely botched. That took 3 seconds to botch his name, so that's good. 3-year starter, obviously he's competed at the SEC level. We know about the Georgia prestige that the Eagles seem to target over and over again. He actually played alongside Nakobe, Jordan Davis, Ringo, and Nolan Smith. So he's got a lot of experience with those guys already. So that's probably going to help him settle in. This was an intriguing selection just purely because of what they drafted earlier in day 2. Like they got themselves a linebacker pretty early on. And, you know, with Jahad Campbell in the first round, people already speculating about what that means for Nakobe Dean and that sort of thing. And realistically, I don't think that impacts him. I'm wondering, and this is someone that has not watched tape yet. Like, I'll be honest, when I've not watched tape and when I have, like, I'm not just going to lie and make it up. I could see him, like, without watching tape, I should just make an assumption. It's more of a Jalix Hunt type player. It's someone that's going to be an outside backer that can put his hand in the dirt, that can rush the passer. And again, just open up those flexible options for Vic Fangio. So I, on the surface, really like this. It's another freakishly athletic player who had a 9.37 relative athletic score, another Senior Bowl standout, I should say, and a defensive player from a coach that they very well admire at this point in Kirby Smart. So I'm excited. Of all the players that they've drafted, I think him and the next one I'll talk about, I'm most excited to get into his tape because I want to know why they've taken 2 linebackers when they've just paid Zach Bourne. You've got Nakobe Dean in a contract year. You've got Jeremiah Trotter. Getting one, fair enough. First round, obviously, it was a top 10 talent. You have to take someone that they value that high if he's, you know, looming around at pick number 31 and you can move up and get him. But adding a second in Smail Mondon, like I'm not sure thought process wise. I can't see him being a Mike. I think that has to be an outside backer that's going to play that versatile role. And if you're just going off the relative athletic stuff, I think that's going to be the case. In which case, good fun. It's another Georgia Infinity Stone in there, and it's going to be some intriguing summer play to see what he can do. But we're going to get into his tape, I'd assume, probably Thursday or Friday, maybe next week. But for those that are new to the channel, I stream, I'm going to hopefully stream Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern. And for the next couple of weeks, each stream will be dedicated to a new Eagles rookie breaking down their films. If you want to see that, you want to just chill out, crack open a beer or a beverage and get some snacks and just watch some tape of a new Eagles rookie, then we'd love to have you along and hear your comments. So excited to break all of this down over the coming days. The undrafted signings are going to ruin my Sunday. I think, to be honest with you, they're always this is the time where like Twitter just becomes a minefield because you never know where it's come from. And so many agents will tweet. And then last year, I think it was the first time I've ever seen like fake agents, like people making accounts of fake agents and tweeting stuff. So we'll see. But we should have a tracker on Philly Sports Network. I'm not sure it's gone up. I said to Brian, if he can get it sorted while I'm streaming, it'd be amazing. I don't think he's done it yet. If not, I'll get it done after the stream finishes. So we'll have like an active tracker where you can come through and look at the undrafted free agents that are being picked up. So you're more than welcome to check that out. Dean won't be ready by week 1, which probably, could play a significant role there. It's going to be really weird with Dean, really weird. And also on that note, then, do you put Campbell in the middle for a bit? Is that why then you end up with Mondon? Like, there are some question marks for sure, but it's a very intriguing scenario at linebacker. When the Eagles get there, the list of undrafted players done, are you going to be down the list to see if the Eagles have signed some possible starters? Absolutely. We can start that Monday night. I might even do it tomorrow, depending when they get published, because normally it all gets sort of finalized on the Sunday, and then they don't really tweet about it until like the Tuesday or the Wednesday, I don't think. And then there'll occasionally be a couple of extra names that just pop on, or one that drops off or something like that. So we'll absolutely focus on undrafted free agents. We can do some film breakdowns on there as well. If you go back recently, guys like Mario Goodrich were really exciting when they first joined. You had a couple of running backs that have come through the undrafted side of things to keep an eye on. It's always fun, the undrafted side of the NFL draft. So I'm looking forward to breaking those down. We've got some reinforcements here to help us go through the rest of the players shortly. So we'll bring them in now. So we've got Zach Chauvelella. Nice to see you, sir.
What's going on, guys? How's everyone doing? Happy draft day, day 3. Exciting haul, all things considered. How you doing, Liam?
I'm good. I'm alive. I was saying in the group chat earlier, I think I'm as disappointed as I am not to have done the big super 8-9 hour stream where we're all just running around our own sanity at that point. I do feel better for it.
Yeah, I think everyone feels better for it, but especially you with the time difference. I can definitely see that being true.
Yeah, definitely. It was a smart decision. I think our content has been a little bit better as well because we're not just sat there talking about like cakes and bacon for 45 minutes during a day 3. But one man
for its own additional podcast.
Yeah, exactly. That PSN after dark. And we've also got Corey Nido on as well. I think I pronounced his name wrong again to do it every time. Corey's here. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, Liam. I'll let it slide. It's all good. It's a confusing 5-letter last name, so doing well. How are you? I heard you talking about the lack of sleep, and Zach alluded the time difference for you is definitely a killer.
Yeah, it's been better this year. It's been much better this year. Last night was difficult, but we survived. And we've got plenty of new players to look at. So just to go over, I'm not sure if you guys were listening to the stream beforehand or just hopped on. I was just going one by one of the players that we've picked so far today, and I got down to Smail Mondon. So before that, obviously, there are only 2. Back in the 4th round, they'd taken Ty Robinson, the defensive tackle, and I think that was it. That was only the second one. It was the cornerback as well, wasn't it? The Florida corner. So we'll start with Ty Robinson. Have either of you guys got any thoughts on that selection? Big, I'd say big. Well, a slightly undersized defensive tackle, but with a big athletic upside.
Corey, you want to talk about that first?
I was going to give it to you. Don't matter to me.
Yeah, well, either way we can go for it. I'll talk about him first. Like, you want to talk about a freak athlete? That's that's Ty Robinson, man. This is a guy who I think he's going to come on in and he's going to really provide a lot for. You talked about the relative athletic score I think you mentioned earlier, Liam, but this is a guy who can blow some stuff up in the backfield, right? This is a guy who I think he's going to be able to just come through violently with fierce tenacity. Somebody who's going to be able to not only rush the pass, but also stuff the run at the same time. His weight came out much different at the combine than it did playing for Nebraska. I think Nebraska, they had him over 300. Then obviously you referenced to it earlier. He was like under 290, I think, right around the combine. So he's got to get that weight back up. I am intrigued by a lot that has, his athletic profile. But the question is, if he does put that weight back on, which he may have to, in order to really thrive against offensive linemen. Is he still that same athlete, 20 pounds heavier, 15 pounds heavier, So that's one thing that we really got to see. But I think that, when you're working with Vic Fangio and you're working with, the Philadelphia Eagles and Clint Hurt, it's going to be great for him. This is a fantastic opportunity. I think this is one of the best spots for him to land because, again, his body just being in flux between last season to this season, he's going to really need to land on a weight and stick to it, and be able to cultivate his athletic profile from there. And I think Philadelphia is the perfect place to do that.
Yeah, to add on to that, what I like about it is his toughness. He was one of 10 Huskers to wear the single-digit number uniform, and that is a team voting where they declare who are the toughest guys on the team. So if you're in a single-digit uniform at Nebraska, that means that you are tough as nails. You bring that tenacity, and I think that's a perfect fit for a guy who is going to be a rotational depth piece to start to play alongside Jalen Carter. I really like the physicality and the athleticism that Zach mentioned. I do think Zach makes a great point. He was listed at like 288 when I did the write-up, so he definitely has shed some weight. Can he play D tackle at 288, or does he have to get back up to maybe 300 pounds so he can hold his own? That remains to be seen, but I love the pick, and I think it's a really solid choice to help solidify that depth on the D line, which is what they're needing after Milton Williams left.
Well, and just one more thing, I think, sorry to interrupt you, Liam, and Corey, you just alluded to it. Liam, you mentioned it earlier. Like that Milton Williams loss, that's the primary defensive tackle loss, right? So Ty Robinson, probably throughout the year, I didn't really look at him and say, oh, that's a Milton Williams type, right? There's that fierce, angry, probably more of like a 3-tech, I probably thought throughout the year. That being said, if he does want to play down low at this weight, and if they do want to move him around a little bit, that could be the vision moving forward, right? Is that Milton Williams he's got more size in terms of height than Milton Williams, obviously, which is a potential advantage there. But really someone who you can move around to, multiple different spots on the line. Even including, I would say probably the edge is a little bit premature. I think they want to get a lot of that speed out there when you're talking about a lot of those linebackers. But you're definitely talking about putting him out there, whether it's in 2-tackle formations, 3-tackle formations, just a lot of optionality, which we know is the buzzword for Philadelphia to have with Ty.
I think the other thing that, and we'll kind of round out for Ty on this, I think, is just that you kind of alluded to it a bit, but Fangio's defense obviously demands a lot of creativity from its players. And I think through the first, or even if you go back 3 years and you look at when they've tried to toy around with this Fangio scheme and it never quite worked out under Sean Desai or Jonathan Gannon, and they were trying to drop guys like Fletcher Cox into coverage, and the initial reaction obviously wasn't great from the players. And over time, the players have gotten used to it and that sort of thing. If there's ever a defensive tackle that can drop back into coverage, it's an athletic freak that's weighs a smidge under 290. You'd have a harder job doing that with someone like Jalen Carter. You wouldn't want to do it necessarily because he's so valuable in, disrupting the pass. So with someone that maybe isn't going to be as good as shedding blocks potentially because of that lack of power, then I think that's also an option to bear in mind, is that they might want to keep him around that range. Like you said, Zach, not necessarily move him out to the edge, not necessarily start playing him at like a 5-tech or something, but just have him on the line, just shadowing one of the defensive tackles, drop back into coverage. You've just got yourself another wildly athletic linebacker, 2 of them, in fact, as we've seen today. So there are some options there, I think, and it's going to be very intriguing to see what they do with him. The next player they picked, obviously, after that, they did make a little trade, got themselves an extra 5th-round pick, and then gave us an absolute headache for about an hour and a half as we tried to sift through exactly what happened. But it was Mac McWilliams, a corner, ended up transferring to UCF, 5'10", so looks destined for the slot. And my main takeaway was that I think we're going to see a little bit of a shuffle in the secondary to some extent. I don't know how much. Well, I mean, obviously the main subject here is Cooper DeJean, and I feel like every stream I've done this weekend, I've said I think he could move to safety, maybe he moves to the boundary, and now you've got a player that is very strictly a slot corner. Presuming he gets up to a starting level, that could be an option. If not, you've got a very good backup behind him, and you can ride Adoree Jackson on the outside. But as a player, I'll come to you first this time, Corey. Like, what do you make of McWilliams? Have you watched any of his tape, or are you just sort of still learning about him?
I watched a little bit of it after he made the pick. Some of his clips from the Senior Bowl popped off, and his ability to stick to guys one-on-one really stood out to me. So a little undersized, as you mentioned, most likely will be the backup in the slot cornerback position right now. But there's been people that really like him, and some are saying we might look at this draft in a few years and ask how he slipped. He originally started his collegiate career at UAB and then finished at UCF, and he was able to just kind of be a little bit of a ball hawk there. And I think just getting him involved with that cornerback room. I mean, you got Quinion, you've got Cooper. I know they brought Adoree Jackson in, who's been around the league for a while. Keely Ringo is in the mix. So this is what they like to do. Nick Sirianni has mentioned it multiple times. They want to breed competition from the jump. So this is what that pick is to me, in my opinion. Is McWilliams going to light it up like Cooper DeJean in the slot? I have no idea. I would say no, but at least he's now going to push for an Adoree Jackson to bring out his best and not just rest on his laurels. Oh, because he's been a veteran, he's been around the block. So I like the pick. I think it might be one of the lesser picks for me in terms of where I rank them, as much as I love them. But yeah, I mean, from what I saw in the Senior Bowl tape, he can stick on guys, good one-on-one, doesn't let his size really get to him. And I think that's a big play when you're a cornerback.
Yeah, I got to double down with Corey here, actually. I think this is a competitive nature pick. I think this is a depth pick, right? And this is not necessarily to say that they don't see him pushing for starting snaps in that slot on occasion. But I think the idea here is that they want to be able to have I'm going to throw the word optionality out a lot, because Howie certainly has. But, to have that depth, at so many different movable pieces, right? Because, obviously they drafted Makuba earlier in the draft. So you think, oh, well, we bring in more kind of like a center fielder type safety, something who we didn't really have before. We've seen Reed Blankenship make those kind of like playmaking moves, but he's not really that free safety. And then obviously Sidney Brown's more like a missile than he is a free safety, or a center fielder type, I should say. So now you're able to kind of put Cooper into that Malcolm Jenkins role potentially, like you mentioned earlier. You're able to move him to the outside if you have to. You're able to keep him in the slot, of course, which is where I think he might spend the most of his time. But if he does move outside, if he does move up top, now you have a guy who's dedicated directly to the slot, which you no longer have since Avonte Maddox left. And I think that's one of the biggest things, is just looking to replace that Maddox role. Obviously, he's now in Detroit. I think he's still in. I know he's signed there. I think he should still be with them. But you're looking to replace that Maddox type. And I think for the long term as well. And I think that's where McWilliams comes here. This would not have been my pick personally. I'm kind of big on Brady Swinson, or at least this late in the draft. Jaden Blue, adding another running back to the equation, I wasn't against either. So there are a couple picks that I had higher than this, even Elijah Roberts out of SMU. But that being said, I understand the pick. And it's one of those things where, like, looking at how the corner draft fell, I think they needed to add a corner along the road here. And I don't know if there was a better corner that they had a better opportunity to add. Not including those first two picks, which I think that they did relatively well with, that I would not have wanted them to go with that corner route alternatively. So I think they maximized their opportunity to take a corner here. And I think there's true value in that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'll touch on it in a sec. I just want to say there's a lot of love for Antoine Powell-Ryland in the comments at the minute.
There should be.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a Commanders fan coming in and gutted that we've got APR. So that's going to be a very fun player to discuss it in around probably 20 minutes or so. I think in regards to that cornerback selection, it reminds me, if I'm honest, more than anything else, of what they tried to do with Zach McPherson. Almost like they're just resetting that. You've got, or in some way, you've got now a slot corner you can hang your hat on in the same way they had Maddox. You bring someone in to potentially be groomed up as well. And it just, we'll see. McPherson never really panned out because no one really forecasted Maddox having a career year, getting a contract extension, and then kind of getting injured and stuff. But they do seem to like just having these developmental guys in, whether it's Eli Ricks, like we said, whether it's Keely Ringo, whether it's Josh Jobe, Mario Goodrich. They love just these lower risk guys that come through the draft and beyond. So, very intrigued to see what he does. The next player up, to be honest, might be my favorite pick of this day 3. And that was the center Drew Kendall, purely because you just can't really draw up anything better than this. This is the most Eagles pick ever. Like his father was an NFL player. You ended up talking about a player that out of 626 centers since 1987 that are in the relative athletic scoring formula, he ranks 58th. So you've got an absolute athletic freak. He's a little bit undersized, but my immediate thought was, I think they're going to move him to guard. I think they're going to potentially give Tyler Steen an insurance policy because they now don't have that now that Mekhi Becton's gone. And just see what he can do. Like, worst case scenario, you've got another freakishly athletic center that can back up Jenkins. Best case scenario, you've got someone that can maybe shift between either spot and maybe give Steen a little bit of a kick up the rear, get some competition brewing again, and seeing if he can take that next step. But it's just the base of a player to find a center with that much agility late on with a footballing pedigree, which is something the Eagles absolutely cherish. I love it. I think that's a really, really fun pick. What are you saying, Zach? As Brian encourages you to smile.
Drew Kendall, I hear what you're saying with the undersized thing. If you're talking about him as a guard, at a center, I think that he is fine. I mean, I think he needs to put on a little bit more weight, but you find that a lot with these college kids. Either they need to refine the weight or they need to add the weight. That's usually one of those two things. Looking at the build, though, like if he is a guard, like you said, there's a little bit of that undersized issue, and so I think that it's a bit of like a short-term negative on him. But I think this is a long-term backup center. Potentially even emergency. Cam Jurgens continues to deal with injuries. We have to put him in maybe long-term or even future center. Like he has that potential. And we know the Eagles are great at drafting and cultivating offensive linemen, centers in particular. We've seen that in the past. And, Drew Kendall's one of those guys who, you put him in Stout U, and I think he could come out and if he's given the opportunity to play, a potential Pro Bowl player. He just has that athleticism. If he combines that with the know-how and, a lot of it's going to, depend on how he's able to kind of soak in that, that know-how. A lot of the things that Philadelphia does well in terms of making sure that you're working well with cadence. Obviously, we know about the tush push and the complications that can come over with that. But I don't have concerns necessarily if he down the road needs to slip out to left or right guard here and there, spell Landon, spell Tyler Steen, or whoever the right guard is for the Eagles, because they don't seem to love Steen. But I could see him going either way there. And, above all of it, he seems like a good kid who was brought up well from a football family, like you said. So, that he has that in his blood. And I'm encouraged by it. I think this is a pick here where if you look at how well they handled the offensive line, and we'll talk about some of these other guys later, I think every single offensive line pick they had in this draft was stellar for the position they were in.
Just before I throw it over to Corey for his sake, just a quick shout to Evil Vet as well. I know he's kind of here for every draft stream that we have. It's almost like a ceremonial thing where he always pops in now. So great to see him in. And I'm sure, like, in terms of what did you miss, hopefully we'll get you all clued up for the picks that follow. William mentions that he won't have to slide Dickerson over if Cam Jurgens goes down, which I think goes really nicely off of Zach's comment. What are you thinking, Corey, about the move?
Yeah, I like it. I mean, I think what Zach said about the linemen on the offensive side, they really hit them pretty well, and we're going to talk about some of the other guys. But, Kendall, he made 37 starts at Boston College, but really athletic. He was a first-team All-ACC selection 2024, so one of the better offensive linemen in that conference. He looked really good in the Shrine Bowl in the pass protection, which was pretty interesting. And last year, he allowed just one sack on 300-plus pass protection snaps for BC. So this is a guy who understands pass protection and can be a link in that chain, if you will, that has suited the Eagles so well over the years, having arguably the best offensive line in the game. Dave Zangaro of NBC Sports Philly just tweeted out that Kendall told the media that despite playing exclusively center, he believes that he has the versatility to play guard as well, and he did play guard before Boston College. So, there is an opportunity for him to kind of be a flexible guy. And that RAS, that relative athletic score that has kind of taken the draft by storm this year, he posted a 9.20 mark, and the highest you can score is 10. So if you're looking at the Eagles draft, that puts him fourth among their draft picks with the RAS score available. So, I mean, this kid is a pretty freakishly athletic center. I know you guys had mentioned the size. You put him with Stoutland, and maybe the size doesn't matter, and you just teach him up on footwork and technique. And I love it. I mean, they just continue to bolster the depth of this offensive line, and it pays off. I mean, look at Mekhi Becton this past year. How many people expected Becton to have the year he had after he kind of flailed with the Jets, and now he cashes in on a payday, and the Eagles have to find a replacement for him. So I like the pick a lot.
I really agree. And talking of replacements, the Eagles are replacing Jalen Hurts with Tyler McCord out of Syracuse, a backup quarterback. No, but they have added to their quarterback conveyor belt once more. The QB factory stays very much alive. I love it. I think it's like a really nice touch. I know Jeffrey Lurie has always been insisting that you add a quarterback every year. And while you don't always get the grandest returns for them, Clayton Thorson, you do get the occasional gem or someone that can come through and just be valuable. Like, I think we can all agree that while Nate Sudfeld was never generational, he had his place in upsetting Giants fans specifically. That was a fun little era. But it's always just good to develop younger talent. And if you look at even Tanner McKee's progress from year 1 to year 2, it's nice to get an arm in there. And I think McCord is a very interesting name anyway. Broke the ACC record for passing yards in his final season after a bit of an up and down time with Ohio State. Bit more of a pocket passer. You're not going to see him be breaking off any runs or doing QB options or anything like that and keepers. But, for a game managing quarterback that you can stick in there in a 2-minute pinch situation, if you can build him into that, then I think that's a fun pick. Any thoughts on the QB factory right now, given that they still don't really have a veteran? I mean, I don't think Jalen Hurts needs a veteran at this point. It's more the insurance policy if he goes down. But yeah, it's a fun pick.
I think it is. I think it's a fun pick. It's a good story. McCord's from Mount Laurel, New Jersey, went to St. Joe's Prep, powerhouse football program there at St. Joe's Prep. And he's got a solid arm. I kind of think that he's already the number 3 going into the training camp. I think DTR is the guy on the outside looking in. Maybe his dual threat ability kind of keeps him in that number 3 range a little longer. And obviously he has played some games in the NFL, but I like what McCord can bring. It's a cool story. There's a photo that he posted of him and his family when he was a kid at the link. Grew up an Eagles fan. So you got him, you've got Campbell, just 2, current Eagles fans now playing for it. And I think that kind of gives them a little more juice as well to prove that they're worthy of the pick from the hometown team. So, I thought they were going to take a quarterback this draft just as a depth piece. I'm glad they didn't take Sanders. I just didn't want to deal with that circus that would come not only with Dion, but also week 5 if Jalen's got a bad day. And, remember when Sanders lit up the Cleveland Browns 3rd string defense in preseason? So, not that I don't think the Eagles could have handled everything that goes with Sanders. And listen, I think it was a tough break for Sanders. I think a lot of it has to do with his dad, unfortunately. I don't know what the Browns are doing. They've got like 17 quarterbacks right now. But anyway, McCord, I like it. Cool story. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up making it to be QB3. DTR gets pushed out or traded, and you've got Jalen, McKee, and McCord as your 3 guys.
Really quickly, just before Zach pops in, I did escape very, very luckily from last night's draft because Duck came in the comments and said that the Eagles are going to take Sanders in the 6th round. And I made a bet, and I said, if they do, I'll do a Shuy live on stream. I was like, if they do, we'll end it. It's the end of the draft. We'll do a Shuy on stream. And as soon as Ian Rappaport pops up on my screen and starts talking about the Eagles, I started just like getting a little bit twitchy there for a moment. So that could have been chaotic. But how are you feeling about it, Zach, and maybe the lack of Sanders and the addition of McCord as well?
Barring a trade in the next couple years, a trade of Kyle McCord, he will be the number 2 quarterback for Philadelphia.
That is Tanner McKee disrespect. I can't tolerate.
I think this season Tanner McKee has it. I think there's a chance they move on from McKee after this year because they like Kyle McCord so much. And you look at this guy, he throws a beautiful deep ball, very, very accurate deep. He was the highest rated per PFF quarterback prospect against pressure. And granted, you have to consider who he's playing against, being that he's playing for Syracuse, but still higher rated than every other quarterback in this class, right? So that's impressive. That's something that Philadelphia obviously, appreciates and wants out of their quarterback is, obviously they have their stout offensive line, no pun intended, in front that hopefully, minimizes as much pressure as possible. But to be able to have a guy who can still make those decisions under pressure, I think that's one of the greatest things about Kyle McCord that also doesn't get mentioned as much as some of his other positive tendencies. I had him easily as a top 5 quarterback in this draft. I thought that there were many teams that should have selected him much higher. It's great that he's a local kid. That's fantastic. That's a great story. Kind of shades of like the Jahad Campbell thing too, because both of those guys obviously are coming back to a homecoming of sorts. Campbell and McCord were not far from each other at all. They grew up like 15 minutes from each other for people who know South Jersey. So that's pretty cool to see. And maybe we'll see some. There's that offense-defense barrier, but maybe we'll see some kind of great companionship growing from there for years to come. But I'm very excited about him as a prospect. I'm glad to have him here. I love Tanner McKee. I don't mean to slander Tanner McKee. I'm very excited about Kyle McCord. Certain stations will have you believing that he will push Jalen Hurts to a starting job. I am not here to do that. I do not think that he will because Jalen is fantastic. But Kyle McCord is a guy who really excited to have. If I have great confidence if there should be an injury. I have great confidence if down the road they just need to get a win and they need to give Jalen a game off. Kind of like we saw this past year where if it was do or die, Jalen probably would have played. But it's games where we're still trying to add on to that record to get home field advantage, this and that, and you want to be able to spell him that game. I feel comfortable with a guy like Kyle McCord and Tanner McKee for that same token to be there. But I'm just excited that he's a part of this team just because I think that this value is insane. And if they want to flip him, in the next year, 2 years, I think we're talking about a third, potentially second round pick that you can potentially get for this guy if he gets the opportunity to show what he can do because he's that talented. And then just really quick, since you brought up Shooter Sanders, Corey. So I think it was this recently just came out. I think it was it Jeff Kerr? No, it was Jeff McClain who said that the Eagles were not in on Shooter Sanders. So Liam, you didn't really have an option there apparently. So that's great. As far as what happened there, I think a lot of it's his dad. I certainly didn't want that situation in Philadelphia, even though it's probably one of the best places suited for handling that kind of situation. I think he's a fine talent. I did have him around that 3rd, 4th round. So I think he went a little bit lower than where I would have projected him going. There clearly was some collusion going on in these NFL front offices that multiple teams had him effectively blacklisted. And you had reports from scouts saying the exact same thing, that he was not on the board at all for a lot of these teams. And that sucks. Like, I get that you don't want his dad involved. I get that he's not a top-tier talent, which that's the biggest thing that I judged him on, is that I just don't think he's that great of a talent. But for so many teams to blacklist him just because of his father or his perceived attitude, when there's thousands of players like him, he just had more opportunity in front of a camera. That's the difference. Like, he's a kid. So for that to be the case, I think that really sucks. But I am happy for him in Cleveland. I think that's a good landing spot for him. He seems pretty happy there. I think he's the best quarterback in Cleveland right now. So I think there's a chance that he's starting by the year's end there. But I do have to say, happy that we don't have to deal with Dion in Philadelphia, because that is still a real concern, something that I was not looking forward to dealing with. So to go from that to Kyle McCord, it's almost even a little bit sweeter, just because of the homecoming, the talent that he has. I just think he's a more talented quarterback than Shedeur. It's an unfortunate story for him. Things worked out pretty well for Philadelphia, though, and at the end of the day, that's what we're here to talk about. And it's looking pretty bright in Philly.
To be fair, if you put Sanders in Philly in a QB room with Jalen Hurts, it's like having Batman with that old super guy hero from SpongeBob just in the same room, and I don't think that's gonna go down too well. But it's an unfortunate situation, but obviously happy he got drafted. The next player the Eagles drafted, though, was someone out of Michigan, an offensive lineman by the name of Myles Hinton. So another offensive line pick here, and certainly not the last either. They end up with another just after this. So really stacking up here for these potential swing tackle players. We can probably talk about both of them in one go. So you had Myles Hinton from Michigan and then Cameron Williams out of Texas. I was more drawn to Williams, just given the fact that he's 21 years old and stands at like 6'6", like without even having to look at tape. Like the big thing with this draft class has been COVID season. Players have been there for an extra year in college. You've got like 24, 25, 26-year-old players coming out. You now get a 21-year-old tackle built like an absolute machine, very athletic. Spot starter at Texas, didn't play out of this world by the sound of it. We'll go over the tape on stream on Monday. But if you're Jeff Stoutland and you get a 21-year-old kid with that kind of frame and that kind of power and size, then it's absolutely worth taking a shot that late in the draft for sure. So, I mean, how are you? Is there any one of those two players that stand out between Hinton and Williams? We'll go to Zach first this time.
Yeah, I agree with you that I think Williams is the standout here. A lot of people didn't expect him to come out this year. He probably cost himself, 100 spots in the draft, I think, easily by coming out this year. So I definitely get that problem, which is why I think it's great for him that he landed in Philadelphia, that he's able to work under Jeff Stoutland, because I think you're looking at it otherwise a situation of a guy who's just unrealized potential. I think that's what you'd be looking at if he landed almost anywhere else. So in Philly, I think he truly has the opportunity to make an impact in the NFL. And he's someone who I think we're going to be watching for the next few years, who could, potentially become the heir to one of these tackles on the outside for Philadelphia. But I don't want people to sleep on Myles Hinton, because Myles Hinton, what he does, as well as most linemen in this entire draft, is he's able to move up to that second level. And that's something that we know that Philly loves their offensive linemen to do. This is a guy who I think there's a chance that he could kick in a guard. We're going to see that he didn't really play. I think he only had like one snap as a guard in college, but I think there's that opportunity for him to move if they don't want him to play that swing tackle role. Like if they decide moving forward that, and this is part of like that issue of having the duality of him and Cameron Williams. Like if they decide, all right, well, Cameron Williams, he's going to be our swing, then maybe you look at him to move into that guard type role. But if they decide, Cameron Williams, like we want to just focus on just developing you as a, right tackle, left tackle, whatever they decide they want to pin him at. And I think they'll make that decision kind of early based on how they feel the roster is going to grow down the line. Then you're potentially looking at him as a swing tackle, and he just, with the versatility that he's able to play with, thanks to his athleticism, this is a guy who I think no matter what role he serves, be it at guard, be it at tackle, he's just going to be another chess piece on that offensive line for Philadelphia. And again, the word of the day is optionality. And Myles Hinton, it may not be as talented overall, peak for peak, as a guy like Cameron Williams, but there's a lot to like thanks to his versatility.
Yeah, I agree with you, Zach. Unfortunately, this will be my last two guys to talk about. I got dinner to go to. But yeah, I agree with you. For what it's worth, I know people, don't love him, but Elliott Shore-Parks tweeted out how he views the roster status. He has Williams as a lock and Hinton as a long shot, but he also has Powell Ryland as a long shot, which I disagree with wholeheartedly there. So take that with a grain of salt. But going back to Williams, I think this just speaks to the volumes of the ability that Howie Roseman, his staff, and Stoutland have, where they can identify a guy like a Cameron Williams and say, yes, this kid is super green, but give us a year to mold him, like Zach said, and he could be a big-time player. And I agree with Zach. I think whoever told this kid to go into the draft as a true junior, I don't think they led him in the right direction, because reading about him and seeing what others think about this kid, they think that if he were to go back to Texas for next season, he would potentially be a first-round pick if he put it all together. So if you're just taking the expectations and the possibility that this kid could be a future first-round pick and you got him in the 6th round of this year's draft and you get him in your building for a full year, I mean, I think the potential here is massive for the Eagles. So I really am excited to see what Williams does. Going back to Hinton, similar to the center they drafted, he comes from a good bloodline. His father, Chris, was a 7-time Pro Bowler, was the 4th overall pick back in 1983. So he knows what it takes to get to the NFL. He's got his dad to help him kind of coach him up. And he's got a really big body. He could be versatile as well. Michigan had a solid running attack, and I like the pick too. But if you're asking me if it's Hinton or Williams, I would take Williams over Hinton right now. But I wouldn't be surprised if Hinton makes some noise in camp as well.
Yeah, love to completely agree. Love to see it. Corey, have a great dinner. You've definitely earned it this weekend.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I have to spend some time with my wife, Happy wife, happy life for those gentlemen out there. All right, guys, take care.
All right, take care, man. All right, so that will leave us with.
I said I left my wife sick in the other room while Corey's taking his out to dinner. So different approaches,
The different levels to this game. So we've got one more prospect left, then we can kind of go over a draft recap. Before we get to that, is that a West Ham flag blowing in the background, or am I imagining things?
That would be a West Ham flag.
It is a West Ham flag. No way. Are you a West Ham fan, or is that like a...
I'm not afraid to call myself a casual West Ham fan. Yes.
Nice. Cool. It's my mum's team. So my mum grew up like 5 minutes from their old stadium. Like she's from like South London, and so she loves West Ham. My younger brother's obsessed with them, and then I just chose a team that was red and were awful, and here we are. So that's I thought I could just see the
and I didn't really have any regrets after that. I mean, we're not the best, but we're fun,
Yeah, no, I love to see it. Talking of lucky and a similar colour, we obviously got like the kind of crimson-y West Ham there. Virginia Tech's Antoine Powell Ryland, APR, as he is said. Any name with an abbreviation, I think I'm automatically a fan of. Like, for some reason, it just hits different when you're writing it. But I think you're very excited about this. I know a lot of the guys in the chat are excited about this. Do you want to take the lead on what he's going to bring to the table? Because this could be the gem of this group for sure.
Yeah, and I think that it's so tough because there's so many guys who could be the gem. Obviously, we were just talking about Williams, who I think is another guy who could potentially fit that. And I mentioned earlier how I was a bit disappointed that they missed out on guys like, and we were talking through the chat through the entire draft about some of us were fans of James Pierce coming in. Brady Swinson was a popular name in the chat. I liked Jared Ivey out of Ole Miss. Oluwafemi Oladejo, who obviously went higher than the Eagles really could have realistically gone after him. But to be able to land a guy like Antoine Powell Ryland so late in this draft is incredible. This is a guy who I think you're going to be able to again, you're not really moving him around necessarily positionally, but I think they're going to be able to kind of move him, on either side of the line, just to kind of switch up and keep the opposing offense guessing, right? But he's quick, he's explosive. He's got to work on building his lower body strength, because he's a little bit light in the legs, which is a little bit of a problem in the run stopping game. But just up top, he's an absolute monster. This is a guy who I think, with his combination of power and speed, working under Vic Fangio, this is someone who could grow into a legitimate role player moving forward for this team, and someone who I think has pure, like really great second contract potential. And then you're talking this late in the draft. Like that's probably one of the most impressive things I think that you can say is that this is someone who could stick around for a while. And again, it's that combination of speed and power that he has. He's got real good pop off to get off. This is somebody who I really think could maybe not a game record necessarily, but he puts that split second of doubt in the offensive line, which can completely de-link their connection and like alongside some of the other amazing athletes that Philadelphia has. I just think he's going to fit right in.
Yeah, no, it's definitely an exciting pick. It's probably the one player outside of the center I'm really excited to just dive into the tape and see what I've missed because I was a bit late to the draft this year. And it's a testament to the Eagles team. I've said it all weekend, but just the draft coverage from near enough Super Bowl onwards has been just absolutely ridiculous to a point where I didn't even publish a mock this year because every time I go to, there'd be like 2 pending. And I can't get that out now. And I'll wait a minute and then I'll start again. And it was just endless. It was so good. And I'm so proud of the Eagles team we have. But it just meant I missed on a lot of these guys and getting to watch them. So we get to do it all together. We get to watch them and evaluate them. So we'll be doing that over the coming weeks. But yeah, it's cool. And I think the nice thing with that spot for it as well is that realistically, I said the other night that if you go out and you sign someone in the second round of the draft or you pick even in round 1, because there are a couple of names available, that's fine, but you're immediately writing off the Bryce Huff experiment, in my opinion, because there is no way you're going to prioritize that when you've just spent a first-round pick on a very cheap contract for a player. So now you've got, Azeez Ojulari, you've got Josh Uche there, you still have Huff, you've got Nolan Smith, you've got time. That's the biggest thing. You've now got time, you've got no pressure to develop a player where there is clearly a lot of upside there. There's a lot of physical upside for him to tap into. And you're going to be around a great group of players who Nolan Smith just took a gargantuan leap in his production this year. Just of being around that group of guys. And someone like Jalix Hunt, I think, would fit in quite well with someone that's also a little bit lighter, that is, making an impact off the edge. It's going to be a really good spot for him. And I'm excited to see what he'll be able to do. So that rounds out the draft. Any closing thoughts on the class overall? Like if you had to give it a grade, so I know it's very, very early doors and it's nearly impossible, but in terms of filling team needs and stuff, like how would you grade it?
Yeah, I mean, considering the picks that they came in with, I have to give it an A-. I'm tempted to give it a B+ at first, but because so much of this is based off potential, but I really think an A- is where I'm sticking at. The Jahad Campbell pick, I think, is a certified A+, right? Where you start to lose me a little bit, I think Mukuba was a good pick. I think that you probably could have gotten him a little bit later down. And there was at least one, arguably 2 safeties, I would argue, would have been better. I'm a Kevin Winston guy. I know that Anthony, he mentioned that he was a big Xavier Watts fan as well. So either of those guys, I think you could argue ahead of Mukuba, though I do think that he is going to have a positive impact for the team. And then obviously I mentioned earlier, my feelings. Mac McWilliams, I think, is a talented player. And I think that it is a good need to solve there. But again, just looking at the value of some of the other players who were picked around there, I think that you could have done a little bit better here or there. So, to speak all that negatively and still call this an A- draft, I think just speaks, how highly, what a great job that Howie Roseman does. For me, the Jahad Campbell pick is the primary focus. I mean, that was such an amazing get for Philadelphia. They're going to try and play him in that Micah Parsons-esque role. And is he going to be Micah Parsons? Like, that's obviously asking for a whole heck of a lot. But to have a guy in there who can realistically play that type of role on your defense, and that's really interesting. They didn't add any pure edge rushers, which I think is another. Like they Philadelphia really believes in picking the best player available. Mm-hmm. And so even in this case, I think you can see that they address needs to a degree, but as opposed to going for a straight, defensive end, for instance, or even perceived outside linebacker, they went for a little bit more of these kind of versatile pass rushers, which is it's going to be interesting to see. It's a bit risky though, because you really want to make sure that you have guys who are able to, truly, like, we'll set the edge in the run is one question that I have. How great are these guys going to be able to do that? Because we talked about a lot of these pass rushers, and one consistent issue is they may be great at meeting the run off the jump, but they're not a lot of great run stuffers outside, obviously, of and he's not an edge rusher, but they're defensive tackle out of Nebraska. So, for them, are they going to be able to stop the run on the outside? That's going to be a major question. But the reinvestment in the linebacker, I think, goes a long way to answering that question as well, because now there's just so much more support behind your front four, front five. So I think it's something that'll work out well for Philadelphia. I think that this grade could easily change over the next coming years, and I would expect it to rise, if anything, as opposed to fall. But I give it a solid A- for now.
Yeah, I think I'm in a kind of similar boat. Like, I'm probably torn between where you are and where William is. William says it's a B. I think you summed it up perfectly with that final statement of, like, in 5 years from now, we could be looking at this draft. And I don't think all of those players are going to contribute first team, every single down. But you might have one of those two linemen end up signing somewhere else in like a Halapoulivaati Vaitai fashion, or the Eagles end up getting something back in a trade. You've got the same potential with the quarterback, potential maybe like with Macmillan. Like, I think there's a few players there where they might not be every down players, but they're going to end up being valuable and then getting money or assets back and recoup somehow. So that's intriguing. The only thing that gets me is the fact they took two linebackers. I understand their different spots. I understand the Kobe Dean's contract years there. You've just paid Zach Bourne. I think you've gone from one extreme to the other, having never paid linebackers to now just going all in on drafting them as soon as humanly possible. But look, I think you're right as well in that it opens things up for support. And the big thing that this team did was ensure that going into the offseason, there weren't really any pressing team needs. The only need they had, the most significant one, if you ask most Eagles fans on the street, would probably be, Dallas Goedert's going to get traded, so they need a tight end. And that was it. And that's a player that hadn't been traded. He's still on the team. Like, you're talking about a need that is purely hypothetical. It was just depth. The only one really would have been a safety to replace Gardner-Johnson. They did that. Potentially a cornerback to replace Slade, but I don't think they do. Or if they could have done, move DeJean outside. You've now got a slot corner to replace DeJean. They've done it that way. I think they've been very smart, and the biggest compliment I can give them is that there were a lot of times where they could have overswung and they could have really tried to just go for like a deep half-court three for no reason and trade up for a player that wasn't there. And instead, if they got pipped to the post, they just moved back. And you're seeing a very, I think, aware Howie Roseman with things now. Like, he's kind of been through his era of reaching for players and taking on unnecessary injury red flag risks and stuff. Like, that's not happening. This was a very, in a way, I'd say conservative approach from Howie, like outside of the Jahad Campbell one. But even then, didn't go out and, break that mold and go away from the process, stuck with the fact that it's your best player on the board. Like, you don't go away from that just because the board's fallen a bit differently. So I'm going to go B+++++, as close to an A as you can without just putting it in there yet. But I do think you're right. In a few years' time, we're going to be talking about a draft where there's no reason every player in that class can't have contributed something sustainable or impactful for an Eagles team that, with that class involved, should absolutely still be competing for a championship in 2025 and beyond.
Yeah, and just one more thing just to touch on with this draft is that you look at it, probably about half the picks, maybe more. There's just such great value, and I think that's what drags us up to that A- for me. Is that Jahad Campbell's a guy who was, for the most part, pretty much a top 15 pick consensus across the board for a lot of scouts. You look at a guy, and obviously a guy like Andrew McCoo kind of downplays that because he was picked up, I think, a little bit too early, but they like to fit there. Ty Robinson looked like a consensus third-round pick from everybody that I saw. You look at Kyle McCord, fourth-round pick consensus for a lot of people. He goes in the sixth round. Cameron Williams is a guy who we've all talked about it. Next year, I think it's not unfair to say perceivably, top 60 pick. Like, I know that he's mentioned as potentially first-round pick, but let's call that 60 and be sparingly, right? Antoine Powell-Rydell, like, that's another guy who top 150 pick. He went 209, right? So the value is insane compared to where a lot of these people were expected. I know people don't love, Mel Kiper and his analysis, and I understand that. I'm not usually agreeing with Mel Kiper's, pre-draft analysis, but Cameron Williams is a top 10 offensive tackle in this draft, and he wasn't alone in that thought, right? So to have people like Cameron Williams, Antoine Powell-Rydell, Ty Robinson, Kyle McCord, Jahad Campbell. That's a lot of names and at various levels in the draft. They're not all 6-round picks, who were expected to go, in the 3rd, 4th round. I mean, getting that Jahad Campbell pick where it's the guy who was projected top 15 and he falls to you at 31 is immense value. And I think that we're going to really see, and I think some of those concerns that you have about all those extra linebackers are going to be kind of curtailed pretty quickly. Because again, Dean with the injury, like it's going to be a minute for him, I think, too, before we even really see him kind of back in that role that he played, if we even see him be able to reach that level again this year before he hits free agency. But the fact that we're looking at more like a pass rushing situation as opposed to, and Jahad Campbell can play that Zach Bond role, like, don't get me wrong. But if they are talking about playing him more so in that pass rushing mold, we're going to see some insane creativity from this defense from Vic Fangio this year. And it was immensely fun last year watching the Eagles win the Super Bowl. It's going to be a whole new, different kind of level of fun watching them just move all these pieces along the defense. And that's what I can't wait for.
Yeah, I'm all in for it. It's been a fantastic weekend. And just a couple of quick thank yous. Firstly, to all of you watching. I know to say, I know every year we normally do these big 8-hour watch-alongs every single day. And we've learned over the years as we get a little bit older that maybe that's not the most sustainable thing. So we've gone for these recap shows and the preview shows, and I think that the reaction has been brilliant. And thank you all for tuning in. It's been great to see some new faces and, of course, some old ones. I think Evil Vet has probably been in every draft stream we've had for about since we started doing them like 6-7 years ago. So it's always brings a little smile to my face seeing him in the chat. And in fact, shout out to everyone else that's tuned in as well. New or old. If you want to see more content, again, don't forget that we will be doing like 3 Eagle streams from myself. We're going to have a Flipping the Bird show on Tuesday and plenty of other shows on the horizon as well. So we'll be going over the film for all of these Eagle draft prospects and so much more. And then a second thank you just to our Eagles team, because they've done such a good job of just smashing this draft content, like from David and Ant, Corey, Mike, Brian. Am I missing someone? I probably am, and I'll really be annoyed if I am, but I think that's kind of the main. Mike, I've said Mike. I'm tired. Anyone that's on the PSN Eagles team, Chris. Did I say Chris?
Do we get David and Anthony in there too?
Yeah, I think so. In my head, I did at least.
And Chris,
if not, David Lance. By the way, anyone on that team, they've just been so remarkable. Like, the content since January, as I said, I've never seen better Eagles content on PSN, and I've run it for, it's my 10th year doing this. And it's at such a strong point where, like, I can't really write because there's just so much coming out. And it's like, I would rather just let them have the spotlight and let their mocks do it, because they will do a much better job than me. And it's just been amazing to watch. And me and Brian have spoke like recently, like, I don't know what we're doing on the Eagles stuff. Like, even Brian said, I'm not really writing much. And but when the content's that good, we just kind of directing traffic, and they've been so just in depth, like the level of detail in these mock drafts. And to see David recognized today on a report where they took all the analysts, big 100 big boards, and to see who got the most right, and David's inside the top 100 analysts nationwide for it. It's just really cool. And I'm so grateful to our Eagles team, because I think it really did set us to a whole new level this year. So if they're watching this, which I hope they'll be in bed getting a nap after this weekend, just a massive thank you. And Zach, of course, you're included in that as well for your heroism with the pictures coming in late and coming up with that. And of course, joining me on the stream and running it back just like we did in drafts of years past. It's always good talking shop. And we've done it again. Another year older, another year bolder, another stream, another draft stream in the books.
I noticed you didn't say wiser, and I'd have to agree with that. I think older and bolder is the better way to go.
Well, we'll go with both. Both fine. But no,
we'll get there. We have the Eagles writers to be wise for us. That's the benefit that we have.
For sure. No, but I appreciate you hopping on, man. It's always been fun. And I mean, what are your plans for? Are you hopping off Flipping the Birds Tuesday? Is that a possibility? We see you back in?
I'm on Flipping the Birds Tuesday. Back with Brian. I'm there every Tuesday now. Maybe occasionally on Fridays, our second show day. But at least for the Tuesdays going forward, just balancing it with the Sixers season, with general Philly news. We'll be there at least Tuesday, because there's nothing that could stop me from fully talking Birds.
Love to see it. Well, from myself, Liam Jenkins, from Zach Chauvelella, from all of us at Philly Sports Network, again, a massive thank you for all of your support. Hopefully, Howie Roseman has left you very happy, like a kid opening a PlayStation 1 on Christmas Day. And we'll see where these picks go in the future. But again, I'll say thank you one more time, just because I can never quite put into words how amazing it is to be able to sit here, talk birds, and have so many just responses and people interacting. And it's nice knowing, I say it every year, we have a little corner of the internet where it's our corner and it's a little bit different. It's still Philly and we're super proud of it. So just thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Get ready for a slew of undrafted chaos. Go Birds, and we'll see you soon.